In today's show, we're talking center tiers for fantasy basketball. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com. You can find me on Twitter, as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok, at redrock_bball, and on Instagram, at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free, and we are available on all platforms. Right, we're here to finish off the Tiers series. Matt Smith will be joining me in a second to talk about centers. I did do the video discussing Durant, my new rankings metric, which, for those of you who are unaware, is my attempt to make rankings better. Hopefully it works. We're going to have that up as an option over on Basketball Monster, hopefully by the weekend. Basketball Monster, of course, is open for the season for subscriptions. And then my next thing that I will be putting out, and hopefully that's not far off as well, is Bazemore, which is my dynasty ranking metric. So hopefully we get that coming soon as well. But now we're going to finish off the tiers segment of shows. We've done point guards, shooting guards, small forwards, power forwards, and now it's time to do centers. So let's get Matt in. Here he is. The big fella, Matt Smith.
Smitty.
Welcome back to the show, Smitty.
Good evening to you, Josh. How are you today?
I am good. It is late at night. I'm ready to go. I'm recording with a beer because I need to wind down, man. It's bedtime. Got to have my nighttime beer as we're ready to go and talk about centers. Not that it's that stressful to talk to you, man. I don't need to relax that much. I just need to talk about these centers because people have been asking. The people have been wanting to know when is Matt Smith coming on to finish off this tiers series, and we are here ready to do it right now because we are talking centers, and we might as well just bang straight into it. No need to muck around here. Well, that is absolutely the wrong slide. That is a terrible start. That's what happens when I record late, Matt. It keeps happening to us. This is a better option.
Too many beers, mate.
This is the first one. There's 4 glasses of wine, but this is the first beer. All right, this is better. Tier 1, centers. Big chunk is Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid. Jokic is just going number 1 across the board. Embiid, of course, on ESPN, their ADPs are all whack, but he's 3, 3, and 5. A little bit weird for me to see that Embiid's not going at 2. I think you'll be in agreement with me, Matt, that we could both see, maybe I'm wrong, maybe you don't agree with it, we could see Embiid finishing as number 1 overall, but I don't really see any justification for taking him there.
Yeah, I mean, potentially he could, but, you know, if you take him at 2 and he finishes at 1, that's not going to be a league-winning move. The same if Nikola Jokic, you take him at 1 and he finishes at 5. I don't think that's going to drastically impact your season, but you know, Nikola Jokic has been the number 1 player for the past 3 years. Embiid's been closer than anyone during that time, but I don't think there's any need to complicate things and potentially make a case for anyone else. You know, Jokic has been more durable over the past few seasons as well. So on a per game value and a total value, Nikola Jokic is still the number 1 player, and I'd have Joel Embiid right behind him at 2.
So will you definitely take Embiid at 2?
Right now I would, yes.
Okay. No one else would come into consideration. You wouldn't consider Luka. You wouldn't consider Shea. You wouldn't consider, I don't know, Steph. Probably not. You wouldn't go that far. You wouldn't. No. Let's say it's probably Luka and Shea as the other 2 options. You wouldn't ever think I'm going to go that direction.
Not necessarily. Wouldn't ever. Right now, Luka's at number 3 for me, and Shea, is at sort of 4 or 5 with Tyrese Halliburton. So we'll see sort of what happens over the next 6 weeks, but right now, I'm still comfortable taking Joel Embiid at 2, but it could also depend what I can get at the back end of the second round and at the start of the third, just to sort of build that foundation of my team and then work those 3 players in together. But yeah, as I said, right now I'm pretty comfortable with those guys 1 and 2.
If we look at how my Durant metric puts out tier 1 and also for points leagues, it does have Jokic sitting by himself in tier 1. So again, I don't care if Jokic finishes at 3. It doesn't make a single bit of difference at all. And you can't predict if he gets hurt and misses 50 games. You can't. So just take him at 1. Doesn't matter. Take Embiid at 1 if you want. Also, it probably doesn't matter that much. And then for points leagues, I've got Embiid and Jokic there. Look, it's really hard to argue with any of that sort of stuff, I think, right across the board. Tier 2, Matt, you've got just the one guy in there. That's Anthony Davis. His ADP sits at 11, 12, and 14, of course. We do expect that he is better than that on a per-game basis, but we know that there are consistent sort of lower body issues with Davis. But it is very interesting. I feel like at this time last season, we had this discussion. We said, I don't really think that Davis has even got number one overall upside potential anymore because his rebounds had disappeared. And they had. And then he jumped them up by 3 rebounds per game. He went from 9.9 to 12.5. We didn't think that he had that necessarily in him. He also took his free throws, which had gone from 85 to 74 to 71. They went back to 78. So like it shows how little small changes, like rebounds, 3 rebounds a game. It's hard to predict that's going to happen. Jumping your free throws back up, even though that did drop off for him over the course of the season, just makes that significant difference. So AD is probably going in the right area, but there's no guarantee he goes back to being that top 4 per game player.
No, I don't think so. And again, we've discussed sort of the issues we've got in the back end of that first round into the early second with some players with durability concerns and those trade requests hanging over James Harden and Damian Lillard in particular. So Davis is just another guy you can throw into that mix. Like I said, the free throw was one of the biggest issues of him over the past couple of seasons. I guess when you get Anthony Davis, those regular trips to the locker room, they do make managers nervous as well. So if you've got Davis on your team, there might be a few sleepless nights along the way.
He was pretty good. Like he had that one big injury where he missed half of December and half of January. He missed that time, so he missed a bit over a month. But otherwise, he didn't really miss any other time. There was like 3 games in the last 3 months of the season and 3 games or so in the first 2 months of the season. And then he just missed that big chunk. So he didn't have those things, which has always been an annoying thing with Davis, was he'd miss like 2 games or he'd miss half a game. It didn't happen as much last season. We saw the big injury, and that's really all that hit him, which is, it's not good, but it's, I don't know, I find that a little bit more encouraging.
Yeah, I think you can take a little bit of confidence from that, but we also know his history and the concerns along the way that he does happen to miss games. And like I said, those trips to the locker room and everyone just waits by their phone or by their computer, just waiting for an update on the severity of the injury, which does cause people to panic at times. So yeah, like I mentioned, just another guy to throw into that mix at late in the first, early second round.
Yeah, I don't really have a problem with taking him in the first round or that start of the second round. I don't think there's any issue with that. In terms of Durant's tier 2, Embiid is there because I had Jokic by himself in tier 1. And then for points leagues, I've got Davis there in tier 2 by himself as well. It's really hard to argue that your 3 top centers are Jokic, Embiid, Davis in that order. I think if anyone came up with a different order to that, I'd have some questions about what you're thinking is actually going to go down. In terms of tier 3, I also don't really think there's much argument here with Sabonis being the 4th center in tier 3. He's got an ADP 21, 17, and 18 from Yahoo, Fantrax, ESPN in that order. I took him at number 12, Matt, in a points league mock draft the other day. I think he's a first-round points league player, but I have seen some people think that maybe he's worth a crack as a first-rounder in a category league, and I don't think I can quite get there with that.
Yeah, I'm not quite there either, and I have seen some people tweet that I'm still comfortable with him in the back end of the second round. And if that's the case, then you're probably going to be able to pair him with potentially a Shea or LaMelo or Steph or maybe even Tyrese Halliburton, which is a really nice duo to start off. And again, the 79 games he played last year, so the durable, he had 65 double-doubles in those games and a triple-double threat as well with the assists, the massive boost in field goal percentage. So, yeah, another good season in store for Domantas Sabonis.
I think when we look at Sabonis, it is hard to see how there is significant improvement from last season. I think that's part of it where he is probably that middle second round guy. There's a level of reliability in what he's going to do. He shot about 2% from 3 to begin the season and then started to hit them low volume towards the end. But it's hard for me to look at it and go, well, what if this happens and this happens and this happens? And something can always happen, but I don't really look at what he did and see gigantic room for improvement in it.
No, I don't think so. I think we now know what you're going to get from Sabonis. He's 27 years of age, and it's not like he's all of a sudden going to start blocking shots or hitting three. So you're really drafting him for the points, rebounds, assists, and the field goal percentage, like I said. So at least you know what you're getting with him and how you can build around him. Do you punt blocks or do you add to those blocks later on in the draft? So yeah, I think sometimes there is a level of comfort with these guys who we know what they're going to produce on a nightly basis, and in a way, it makes it easier for you to build around them when you know what you're going to get.
Yeah, like he is relatively consistent in terms of game-to-game production. He's never going to be dropping 35s, but he'll give you that 20 and 12 really, really regularly. 20, 12, and 6 is a pretty common thing that he's going to do. In Tier 3 for Durant, well, I've got Sabonis there for Durant, it's Anthony Davis against the same order, just pushed into different tiers, and Sabonis sits in Tier 3 for points leagues, but I think that those four guys in Embiid, Jokic, Davis, and Sabonis are all probably first-round picks in a points league with the Sabonis more so sitting there on the turn. We're going to get to talk about some more players in a sec, Matt. Before I do that, I'm going to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs are the shorts that make you not only feel good, but they make you look good as well, because they've got this like tight like inner fabric that really pumps your thighs. It really gives them a nice sculpted look instead of your regular stiff cotton khaki shorts. Bird Dogs are made of this cloud knit fabric which looks just like khaki, but it stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. It also has anti-stink, sweat-wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. These are the shorts that you will wear wherever you go. You've got to go to the shops. You're going to go down to the supermarket. You're going to go to a bar. You're going to go to a barbecue. You're going to go to play basketball. You're going to go watch a game. Bird Dogs will transition to whatever you need them to do. They are super comfortable, and when you get them, I'm telling you, you're not going to want to take them off. And now they've got a great new offer as well. When you go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA, or you enter the promo code LockedOnNBA at checkout, you get a free Bird Dogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off, we promise you. That will bring us in, as Obi's trying to move around. Where are you going, you idiot?
He's trying to get into your Bird Dogs by the look of it.
He likes sitting on the Bird Dogs. Good sitting texture on the Bird Dogs. Let's look at tier format. We've got 3 centers here. Finally, we're expanding the tiers out a little bit. Tier 4, it's got the rookie Chet Holmgren. It's got Kristaps Porzingis, who was obviously significantly better than this last season. And then there's Miles Turner. You can see some discrepancies there across ADPs. Turner going as high as 34, Holmgren going as low as 69 over on ESPN. They're all relatively similar in terms of, and this is going to be a common theme throughout this show, that they all have the potential ability to give you 2 to 2.5 blocks a game. They have all of that in common. Porzingis a better scorer, Turner probably a higher field goal percentage player, Chet obviously a rookie, but probably the best rebounder out of that group as well. How do you view the downturn in Porzingis joining the Boston Celtics? Or the presumed downturn, I guess is a better way of putting that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely going to be a bit of a hit there playing with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and potentially alongside Horford and Williams as well. So I don't think we can expect the level of production that he produced last season in Washington. So take that into consideration. Chet Holmgren, again, I think he's going to be one of these players who, as we get closer to the season and through training camp and the preseason games, his value and stock is just going to increase and rise. But yeah, can't wait to see what he'll do this season. And Miles Turner, adds the 3 pointers that some of the other elite shot blockers don't. Again, we've had some durability concerns around him over the past few years, but at 27 years of age, still in the prime of his career and prime for another strong season. So, some pretty nice players here to target if you go small early on with your first 2 or 3 picks.
I think probably the major difference here between, say, a Chet in tier 4 and like a Nick Claxton, who we're going to get to later, is that Chet is going to be a better free throw shooter, but otherwise he's a lower usage center, whereas Porzingis and to a lesser extent Turner are higher usage guys who are going to score probably a little bit more. Now, I think Chet's going to be able to score more at some point in his career, maybe just not this season. So he's probably like you're getting Claxton-y type numbers with a little bit less scoring, but better free throw percentage. We might guess at how his season plays out.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think I mentioned this on one of the other shows that centre tiers is probably the hardest position just to try to group these players because we've got so many guys who are elite in 2 or 3 categories and poor in 2 or 3 categories. So, and particularly over the next couple of tiers, it's been really difficult to try and group them. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying you need to take maybe I'll say this in the next tier, but take this player over someone in the next tier. It really still depends how you've started your draft and what you need at certain points throughout the draft as well. So again, you can slide these players up and down tiers depending on your structure and format.
Let's have a look at how Durant looks at Tier 4 as well as points leagues. Tier 4 is a big boy. There's a lot happening here as these guys are, as you said, like relatively close together. The one that stood out to me in my Durant formula, now this is all based on per game and not totals, is Rob Williams really did jump up the rankings. And we know that 2 years ago, if you had Rob Williams in this area, everyone would have said, yeah, that's fine. That's what he's going to do. Mm-hmm. Obviously, injuries rooted his season last season, but I have bumped him back into this area. But there's Sabonis, there's Porzingis, there's Rob Williams, Claxton, Bam Adebayo, Daniel Gafford, and that's just going to really depend on what sort of things you're looking for from these guys, because Bam is a very different player to what Rob Williams is or Dan Gafford is, and Porzingis is a different player to Sabonis. But that's where overall value can be sometimes a little bit confusing in a category. Like in a points league, it doesn't matter how many points you're going to get us. So I've got Bam, Claxton, Miles Turner, Nurkic. Again, that's a per game thing. Walker Kessler, Porzingis, and Rudy Gobert in that area. And I believe one of these tiers even continues a little bit further. Yeah, the points one is huge. It's Holmgren, Nick Vucevic, DeAndre Ayton, Mark Williams, and Jakob Poeltl. We talk about centers, Matt. I think this is a really good illustration about how it's always been considered, it's a harder category or a harder position to fill. It's like 20 blokes who are going to go in the middle 4 rounds, I would say. There's a million centers that seem to be available through those round 3 through 8 area, I would say.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. And coming up in sort of tier 5, 6, 7, and even pushing into 8, there's still a number of good big men on the board. So again, I've always been strong on drafting elite point guards early. And again, I'll be pushing that again this season for the fact that you can get a good center, and not only one good center, but 2 or potentially 3, like you said, through rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, potentially even 8.
Well, you got to be able to look at Wendell Carter and Clint Capella in like the 90s or 100s, and Daniel Gafford's going around the 100s. Like these are guys who there's no reason they can't be top 50, top 60 type players. But there's just such a weird grouping of all these guys, like 10, 12, 15 guys, all in these mid rounds, that it depends what you've done early. And if you go back and watch our point guard tier, you'll see there's like 20 guys that we think are probably top 50 players as point guards almost. Maybe not 20, but it's close enough. And it's like they're all concentrated there. Then in the middle, it's all big men. All these centers seem to go in these middle group of rounds. Let's bring it across to tier 5. Now, Matt, there's a couple of names we did just mention: Nicky Claxton, Bam Adebayo, and Walker Kessler. Now, people will look at that and they go, well, Adebayo is getting drafted 3rd round, 35, 27, 36, whereas Walker Kessler, for some unknown reason, has an ADP of 107 on ESPN. That's obviously insane, but these guys are like 5th or 6th round players. We are a little bit lower on Bam for this upcoming season. My worry there is that part of how he's been able to establish himself, he lost a lot of assists when Kyle Lowry came, and he turned into a little bit more of a usage player. The problem is, if Damian Lillard comes, not only does Lillard take usage, but he takes assists as well, so he gets the double hit. So that way that he was able to maintain some value is by taking usage. And that's going to go away. And he then becomes clearly the 3rd offensive option. And he doesn't block shots. And sometimes his free throws can be a little bit iffy. And I think if Lillard does arrive on this team, no matter who goes out, it's going to hurt Bam pretty significantly, I think.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I'm trying to factor in here as well. And even, without that trade, Bam has had his assists, rebounds, and blocks decline over the past couple of seasons. And like you said, if Dame Lillard does arrive on the scene, then he becomes the 3rd option, and the assists and the points in particular now dry up as well. And he is the 3rd option behind Lillard and Jimmy Butler. So that is the concern. And once again, we've got all these younger big men coming through. So that might encourage people to maybe have a look at them. We've had Bam Adebayo on our teams before, and now we want to try a Nick Claxton or a Walker Kessler or someone in tier 6 or tier 7, which may cause Bam to drop a little bit on draft day.
Yeah, and I think that's fair enough. Like if Bam's going to drop, there is just a level of uncertainty about how he's going to fit and what the role is going to be and all that sort of stuff. Kessler, I think, has got to be close to the favourite to lead the league in blocks. He's a guy that when I did the video earlier in the offseason of the statistical outliers, like the top in each category and bottom, he appeared like 6 times because he was like in the top 5 for 3 categories and the bottom 5 for 3 other categories. Terrible threes, no assists, no steals, terrible free throws. sky-high rebounds, blocks, and field goal percentage. So there's a very clear thing you're doing with Kessler if you're taking him. Some of the rankings, as I have discussed many times, will skew his block numbers, and people go, well, look at that, he's actually the 15th best player. And I'll say, cool, good luck losing if you think that he's the 15th best player if you're going to take him there. He still has real value in certain areas, but there are a ton of negatives about what he did. Now, looking at his overall numbers from last season with Kessler, Matt, it's hard to judge because he played like 23 minutes, but he was a top 40-ish sort of guy going by traditional rankings, or top 30 over the end of the season. But there are a lot of caveats about just assessing what Kessler can do.
Yeah, again, and that's why we're not big on taking Jaren Jackson Jr. inside the second round, because we've got Walker Kessler here with these elite blocks. We've mentioned Miles Turner, we've mentioned Nick Claxton, Chet Holmgren as well, and then there's still more elite blocks to come. So that's why I think we can use that pick a little bit wiser early on in those first, second, third rounds.
Let's have a look at tier 5 for Durant. I think this is another big chungus one. Yeah, it is. There's a lot of guys in these. There's just so many centers in that are hard to really split. Tier 5 on Durant has Jarrett Allen, Chet Holmgren, Onyeka Okongwu, Yusuf Nurkic, Miles Turner, Jakob Poeltl, and Mark Williams. In points leagues, it's Allen, Şengün, Wendell Carter, Daniel Gafford, Jalen Duren, Steven Adams, Clint Capella, and I think it goes on again. Yeah, it does. And tier 5 for points gives you Zach Collins and Onyeka Okongwu. Just a ton of guys. And I think the thing why when we look at, Matt, and I don't know how you approach this with tiers, but when you see a tier that is chunkier than another one above it, I think it gives you more of a scope to pass on a lot of guys in that tier, knowing that even if you don't take someone, that a round later or 2 rounds later, that someone from that same level is still going to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the perfect way to look at these tiers collectively. We're talking about how to use them individually, but collectively, again, we can see that there's a drop-off in point guards. So you might need to get 1 or probably even 2 point guards in the top 50, and then you can wait until maybe 50, 60, 70 to get a big man or two, because we know they are still there and that depth is still waiting.
Let's head across to tier 6 now, Matt. We've got 2 guys here, and people I think will be surprised to see Alperen Şengün sitting there. Jarrett Allen's in this same one. Jarrett Allen, one of the most boring centers, I think, in the NBA. I don't really see an upside for him. I think there is a chance that maybe there could be a trade. I don't really see a gigantic downside. Maybe he loses a minute or two. But Şengün's one of the biggest hit or miss guys, I think, in the entire draft. If Ime Udoka loves what he does and they put the ball in his hands, he's a top 20 player. But if they pin all defensive woes on him and decide they want Tyrese and Jabari Smith in the front court, well, he might play 27 minutes and be the 90th best player. And the stuff that I keep hearing every time I hear someone talk about Houston makes me shit scared about how he is going to play. The fact that, A, they targeted Brook Lopez in free agency, like a 35-year-old guy to bring on a rebuilding team when you've got a guy who legitimately was their best player in Şengün last season, is meaning that they have a completely different view of their talent than what I do, and that's not a great thing. If I'm viewing a guy one way and they're viewing, not saying we're right, either one's right or wrong, but when we look at them differently, then you can't just say, well, I think he's good, this is going to happen. Because if they're doing all these things and they bench him for Bruno Fernando, and then they try and bring in Brook Lopez, and now there's other options to get Eason and Smith in there, I'm really worried about it going off the rails here for Şengün.
I tend to think that the discussion around bringing in Lopez was to give them that pure defensive center that they don't have on the roster. Like Jock Landale isn't that center. They don't have Jabari Smith can play there at center for parts, but I don't think he's a guy who can play significant minutes at that position. So maybe it was designed to protect Şengün a little bit. But thinking about it more again, I wonder whether bringing in Fred VanVleet and bringing in Dylan Brooks, and like we discussed with the OKC Thunder in a couple of years ago with Jalen Williams about how last year they were solely focused on protecting the perimeter and going after those steals because they didn't have that defensive big man behind them. I wonder whether the Rockets are actually going to try and do something similar and focus their defense in on the guards and the wings, and if they get by, then so be it, kind of thing. But I mean, I put a poll out on Twitter the other day about who is the Rockets' second best player, and if we agree that Fred VanVleet is the first, I think 60% of 1,000 votes had Şengün at second, and I tend to agree that if Şengün is their second best player, why would you take him off the floor? Like, played his
They did it
strengths.
all. They did it all last season though. Like that, he was their best player last season, and they did it nearly every game. I know, obviously,
Yeah.
and the thing is, I started to think it was Silas. Then I heard on a couple of hard what's it called? The one with Dan Favali's podcast, Hard something. So I apologize, Dan. Hardwood Knocks or some shit. I can't remember the name. I completely have blank on it. But it was now I can't remember the guy's name. The guy that covers the Rockets. Anyway, I've completely butchered all of this. And he said he tended to think, oh, maybe it was a Silas thing. And now he's like, Silas is gone. And I don't actually know that it was a Silas thing that was pushing that against Şengün. He thinks it was an organizational directive to perhaps try some other things, and they don't believe in Şengün as a future piece or a future core piece, even though he did perform as their best player. And I went, that's a little bit worrying. When a Rockets reporter is saying that he thought it was a Silas thing, but now he's like, I don't think it was. That's a little bit worrying to me.
But again, they don't have anyone that can play significant minutes in that role.
No, well, this is what I think. I think they'll play Smith and Eason, and Eason at times will feature as a center, even though he is small, because the way he plays, right? High-level rebounder, high-level rim protector, not an outside shooter, and him and Smith will play in there. I just think it doesn't mean that Şengün's going to play 20 minutes. I just think that he's not going to play 35. I think that he'll play 29 or 28, and Smith will get some minutes, and Landale will get some minutes there, and then that enables Eason or Jeff Green. They might play Jeff Green at backup center. Like, Jeff Green's there for some reason. Like, they might do that as well. So I just think that while Şengün was great in year 2, big step up from year 1 to year 2, year 3, huge breakout. My confidence in the way the Rockets view him is pretty low. I'd love to be surprised. I think he's really good. I just have no confidence in it.
So in a roto keeper league, I have the option to keep Şengün or Claxton. Who do I keep?
Look, the upside of Şengün is significantly superior, and we all know that in 3 years' time, Matt, like 80% of rosters are turned over, and if they don't believe in him, he's not going to be there, and then he might be on another team that sees and uses him in a way that is way more. It's not like they're going to be like, man, the Rockets really know what they're doing. He must be trash. No one's thinking that across the NBA. So if you're looking at that sort of thing, I think in the end, talent will win out somewhere. It just might not be on this Houston team.
Yeah, and I think that's the way I'm leaning at the moment. And this time last year, I sat here and I said that, Şengün can be the next Nikola Vucevic, and I still believe that. And with that comes sort of top 25 to top 30 upside. But like you said, we're sitting here discussing, is he going to be top 30 this year or top 130? Like, there's just going to be a massive difference, and it's going to be interesting one way or another.
It's going to be frustrating. I'm really confident that it's going to be frustrating. Tier 6 over on Durant. Again, big chunky one. We've got Şengün, Wendell Carter, Gobert, Ayton, Kessler, Vucevic, Duran. For points leagues, it's Brook Lopez, it's Valanciunas, it's Mitchell Robinson, it's Rob Williams, Zubats, Looney, Bobby Portis, and I'm pretty sure this extends again into Tier 6 again, and Zach Collins throws in there for Durant as well. So with that, both the points and the category league ones that I'm throwing up here, there is really, really large groups of people, 8-9 guys in each tier. Tier 7 for you, Matt, we also go pretty big. Dan Gafford, Mark Williams, Jakob Poeltl, Vooch, and DeAndre Ayton. And people will see that Gafford and Williams have ADPs in the 100s, and Vooch has got him in round 3. That is a gigantic discrepancy. I am out on Vooch this season. I just think he's age 32. He's still the third option. I don't see him getting better than last season. I see him declining if the percentage drops off at all. He doesn't block shots. I don't see it. I don't see him being that guy, but maybe we're just haters of Vooch. I don't know. I just don't see it for him.
Yeah, and I was guilty of writing him off last season, and that drop-off didn't come, a slight drop-off in steals and blocks, but the big hit didn't come, and he also played in 82 games, which was incredible. But I do think this season, as again, he's about to turn 33 years of age, I do think this will be the first time in 6 seasons that he drops out of the top 50, and therefore have him in this tier. And yeah, so like I said, some really good young options. I mean, Daniel Gafford in particular, I think he could be one of the breakout players of the season. There's no competition there for him. All we've been crying out for the last few years is for him to get minutes. Now's his opportunity. All he needs to do is stay healthy and stay out of foul trouble, and hopefully those two things can happen. And yeah, he's going to be one of the big winners this season, I believe.
Vooch dropped his usage last season. He still averaged 17-11, but he was able to do that by hitting 6 percentage points better from 2-point range, which I'm not really sure I buy that being able to stick. He averaged 0.3 blocks per game over the final 16 games. He had he was outside the top 45 over the last 8 games of the season, and he also played only 30 minutes a game over those final 8 games when the Bulls were pushing to make the playoffs and to get into the play-in, which is, I don't know, a little interesting. And I think if there is any hope of Patrick Williams stepping up, well, Vooch, I think, is going to be the guy that has to cede touches. It's not going to be DeRozan or Levine, I wouldn't have thought. So I'm a little bit, I'm just not big on him, but I'm totally with you on Gafford. Mark Williams, I think, is getting to be a steal as well in drafts. People are really worried because they remember what happened at the end of last season where Williams and Richards kept alternating starts. That's just not going to happen this season. And PJ Washington, I don't think is a factor either. He didn't play any center at all last season. I think Williams is going to play 28 to 31 every night and be pretty strong, I would guess. I'm no concern about him at all.
Yeah, and don't forget that the Bulls have the best rebounder ever and future Hall of Famer Andre Drummond still on the roster, Josh.
They do. So that's always a threat for him to take over from Vooch. Let's go to tier 7 of Durant. My points league tiers are actually done for centers. For Durant, it's Capella, Lopez, Robinson, Mitchie Robinson, that is, and Steven Adams there at the bottom. That will bring us now to look at tier 8. Matt, we've got Gobert, Rob Williams, Nurkic, and Okongwu. A very disparate group of players there. Okongwu's a backup. Nurkic is always hurt. Gobert's a first 3-round stud from a couple of years ago. But really hard for me to argue with that. And I know that when I look at Nurkic here and I look at those ADPs, I'm definitely going to get suckered back into picking him. I have to. Like when he's sitting there in round 10, and you talk about the Wizards having no centers, the Blazers have none either. There's nobody behind Nurkic. Like literally not a center on the roster that's not Ibu Baji, their two-way player. So Nurkic's going to have to play. And I said this to someone the other day when people go, well, they're going to dump him on a trade. Why would they give up assets to get off that contract when they're bad? They don't need to. They can just sit there. They don't need the cap space. What are they doing with it? Like, why would they give up an asset to get off of Nurk? There's no young player he's blocking. There's no reason for him to be gone from Portland. Unless someone says, we want to give you something to get him. I don't see why they would do that.
No, I don't think so either. And just on Rudy Gobert, probably could have potentially have him in the tier above, and happy for him to be in tier 7. And Onyeka Okongwu, again, we're waiting for him to take over from Clint Capella. If we do hear that or know that, then potentially he jumps up a tier 2. And like I said, with Robert Williams just always injured, and now he's got Kristaps Porzingis in the front court for company as well.
Yeah, you just think that who knows what they do in terms of minutes. Do they preserve Horford a little bit more? But everyone's injury prone. Porzingis, Williams, and Horford can all get injured. Like, which one's the more important one to preserve? I don't know. I think they're all at probably a similar risk. Okongwu is an interesting one. I think that we lean more towards a minute split this season than we have in the past, but that doesn't mean that his minutes went down under Quinn Snyder last season. I don't think we need to. I don't think we should forget that point of it. Even though his ranking went up, his minutes did drop, and they played him less playing time behind Clint Capella. We'll get to Capella soon enough, but the last tier for Durant here in the category league section, of course, is Valanciunas, Hartenstein, Mason Plumlee, Zubats, Looney, and Larry Nance Jr. Points league tiers are done. And we go to tier 9. Matt, it's Brook Lopez, it's Wendell Carter Jr., and Zach Collins. And Brook Lopez was way better than this last season. Why is he just so far down the list? Because if you go on what he did last season, he probably should be like a tier 4, tier 5 player.
Yeah, he was incredible last season. He went from 23 minutes a game in just 13 games, played 78 out of the 82 games, played 30 minutes a night. His blocks went back to 2.5, which was I shouldn't even say back to 2.5. That was actually the highest block per game rate of his entire career. The previous best was 2.4 back in 19 and 20. So again, basically doubled his block rate from the season before. And just, an out of the box season. So I don't think any of those numbers can stick again, being it the playing time, being the games played, or being the block rate. And for that reason, he's down this low. So be a little bit cautious of Brook Lopez, and I'd stay away from him at those ADPs.
He's fine to draft, right? If you get him later than that, maybe the block rate does stick, but you're right, it was one of the biggest numbers we've seen. And coming off of back surgery, no one would have expected those minutes to jump up, the games played to jump up. We've also got a different coach now. So how does Adrian Griffin deal with that? And the fact that his usage went up was basically because Chris Middleton missed, the vast majority of the season, and that we think is not going to happen. Zach Collins is another guy I really like getting laid. I presume that he'll be the starting center for the Spurs. His assist rate went through the roof last season when he took over from Jakob Poeltl. I think he's going to be playing at least 27 a night, and not out of the realms of possibility that he... we always talk, Matt, about, hey, later rounds, let's get upside. Why can't he be a top 60, top 70 type of player?
Yeah, I think Zach Collins and Wendell Carter Jr. in particular are fairly safe. I'm not sure he'll be top 70, but I think they'll both probably settle in somewhere sort of between the 80 and maybe 100, 110 type range. They'll be strong enough to have standard league value and just be a handy center option who you can plug in on a night and give you some nice well-rounded production. So again, if you do miss out on some centers through those mid rounds, there's a couple of good options here for you.
I'm going to go and have a look at Zach Collins' numbers down this stretch of last season because I think they were pretty good. And if I look at just straight 9-cat rankings, final month of the season, 40th, last 2 weeks, 29th, playing 29 minutes a night, 18 and 8, 2 threes, 4 assists, 1.3 blocks, 52 and 80. That's like an absolute fantasy boner. That is just unbelievable numbers. Hitting huge field goals with above average free throws and blocks and steals and assists and rebounds and threes and points. It basically gave you average or above average in every single category, which is just an enormous thing. Now, of course, Wembanyama's there, and you're not going to have all the Vassell and Sohan and Johnson rests. But to me, that's a gigantic steal. I think people are expecting him to just come off the bench behind Wembanyama, and I don't believe that is the case. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I don't think he'll come off the bench either. But again, he's not going to put up those sort of numbers playing next to Wembanyama. I don't think so.
No, he's not. He's not going to do that level of scoring or those rebounds, but still, he is. I think he's got more upside than what Wendell's really good. I like him, but I don't think he's got the upside to push higher than that necessarily. But I think Zach could, if he re-tiered things at the end of the season, he could be a tier 6 block. He could be maybe close to where Jarrett Allen is or Jakob Poeltl is for this coming season. I think that's a possibility. The last tier, Matt, is tier 10. Jalen Duren's there, Mitchie Robinson's there, and Clint Capella's there. Robinson is just completely hamstrung by the Tom Thibodeau rule of you cannot have more than 9% usage as a center, and the fact that he gets hurt every 5 minutes. Capella, we don't know. We just don't know what's going to happen. We assume he's still going to be useful, but upside is gone. I'm really big on Duren. I am not worried at all about James Wiseman Sr. or James Wiseman Jr. taking minutes away from him. I think Duren's going to play 30 plus. I think he needs to flash more shot blocking skills, but he did that in college. It just didn't come last season. He can actually pass a little bit. He can handle the ball a little bit. I would not, maybe it's not this year, maybe I'm 1 year too early, but a Nick Claxton type season from Duren, which we got from Claxton last season, they remind me of each other a little bit. Duren's stronger and he's got way more upside overall, but I think that he can get to something along those lines.
Yeah, I really like JD as well, and I think if you could get one of him, Daniel Gafford or Mark Williams on your roster this year, I think that's going to be pretty good and be a strong outcome come later in the season. If you can get two, I think all the better. So some three names and 3 young players with plenty of upside to come.
I very comfortably take Duren ahead of Robinson and Capella. There's just so much more upside in what he can do. I think him and Cunningham played 12 minutes together all last season, or maybe it was even less than that. And that's like pick and roll, like porn to see Cade setting up Jalen Duren. I don't know what you jerk off to, Matt, but maybe it is Cade and Jalen Duren pick and rolls. That's what I'm going to start doing this season. And I hope we get to see a lot more than 12 minutes of it because 12 minutes is probably not quite enough for a whole season.
I don't know where to go after that. You've had too many wines and beers.
Let's go to the end of the show. Matt, that is the end of the tiers that we have covered here over the last 5 or 6 nights as we've been recording them. The center tiers are out. What have you got in the cooker over at Basketball Monster at the moment?
All right, so overall ranking tiers are sort of half done, so hopefully they'll be out. What are we now? Monday night recording, so hopefully by the end of the week. And then we'll have sleepers, bust, breakouts as normal. We'll have an article that I've done over the past couple of seasons called the Backup Plan. Basketball Monster members know what that is, and I don't believe it's done on any other site. So a nice little different sort of article there. And backed by popular demand will be my ultimate strategy article, and of course my categorical scarcity article. So plenty to come. We'll also do a couple of live chats leading into the season as well. So yeah, it's all happening. So follow me on Twitter at SManSports, sign up to basketballmonster.com, and we'll see you over there.
Yeah, we will. Matt, thank you for coming on and chatting all these tiers with me again for about the 8th year in a row. Thank you.
It's always good fun, mate. Take care. Cheers.
And that will do it for me today. I know there's going to be someone who's in the chat or in the comments, Josh, what are you going to do? Why don't you chug the rest of that beer? Come on, guys. What do you want me to do? Nah. Should I do it? No, I won't. I won't do it. But I am going to drink it as soon as we get off air because I'm ready for bed and I'm ready to just relax, get things ready. I know this is coming out at a different time, but this is the time that I'm recording and I don't normally record this late. So follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on the Odyssey app and on YouTube. Thumb it up and leave your comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.